I just bought my first car. It's a bit old, but it's a great investment. Every time I fill up the gas tank, it doubles in value.
You're listening to the Goldstein on Gelt Show with certified financial planner and best-selling author, Doug Goldstein.
Hi, my name is Ephraim, and I'm Doug Goldstein's son. Last week, I snuck into the Goldstein on Gelt recording studio, and I had a blast. So why not continue? I just finished listening to one of my father's previous shows called Do You Know Your Retirement Income? Which, by the way, you can go to Goldstein on Gelt and listen to it there if you missed it. And I was thinking to myself, what's the best way to invest for retirement? And when should a person start? Oh, hello, Abba. How are you?
I'm doing great, Ephraim. A little surprised to see you again here, but happy to see you.
Always happy to see you too.
Tell me, what are you doing in the studio today?
Well, I'm here to have a great time like I had last week.
Glad to see you. What's on your mind?
Well, I was listening to what you were talking about in a previous show about how to invest for your retirement. And I wanted to know, when should I start?
Have you started already?
Yes, I did. I have my savings. Is that the same thing as saving for my retirement? Or do I need to have a specific saving just for retirement?
Well, tell me what you've got going. How have you broken it up so far?
I've had my income from the time when I was an officer in the Army. So that's a chunk of money sitting in the bank. I want to know, do I need to do something in particular to that? Or can that stay in the bank, or should I invest it? And then in 50, 60 years, I can start pulling it out.
Okay, so that's one piece of money. What else are you doing to save for retirement?
I have my income, my job now as I'm a student, and from my business, A Day with an Officer.
Which we spoke about last time.
Correct. You can send me an email if you want at Ephraim, that's EFRAIM, at goldstein.co.il. So those are basically my sources of income. And of course, my wife's income from her day job too.
You know, before you start with retirement income, you've got to put some money on the side. Tell me what you're doing in terms of an emergency fund.
As I've heard from a wise man, i.e.
I wonder who that is.
Yeah, who kept on saying, which I see now from friends and the whole corona, that you should have an investment fund anywhere from 3 to 6 months. And hopefully the longer, the better. So if you're stuck without a job, then you'll be fine.
And you refer to that as an investment fund. How do you invest your emergency fund?
No, that emergency fund, I just keep in the bank, just lying down, not doing anything, so I don't lose it by accident.
No, that's critical. We talk to people about what we call the cost of liquidity. When you have an emergency fund, that has to be money that is absolutely liquid in case you have an emergency. If you invest it or you buy a property or it's somehow difficult to get to, then it's not really an emergency fund. Then it's an investment fund. So good for you. You've got your emergency fund set up. You have A Day with an Officer, your company where you give people coming to Israel the chance to spend a day with an Israeli commando officer.
Correct.
You've got the savings that you put aside when you, in fact, were a commander of a commando team in the IDF. And the question you were asking is how to prepare for retirement. What's your goal? What would you like to do?
When I retire, I would like to be able to sit back and spend time with my grandchildren, not need to worry about income.
Just like I enjoy doing. Well, except I'm not quite retired yet. The topic that I don't want to touch on, but I'm just going to raise the question now, is when people talk about retirement, it's critical to think not about what they're retiring from, but what they're retiring to. Because so many people, when they retire, they've been so used to working and having responsibility and the social life that work entails, that then they end up sitting at home and they frankly, they get depressed. They don't know what to do with themselves. It's critical to think about what you want to do during retirement. But as I said, that's not the topic that I think you want to talk about. You're really focusing on how can you financially manage the retirement when you eventually get there. Is that right?
That's right. And to be a bit more specific, how can I know how much money I'll need? Every few months, my household, or when I, please God, have kids, I don't know how much I spend when I have kids. And then how do I know how much money I'm going to need in another 50 years? I don't know what inflation will look like. I don't know what anything will look like. How do I know how much money I need?
So the key word you said there, Ephraim, is inflation. The cost of living seems to constantly go up. Ask anyone who likes to recall in their youth how much cheaper things were. The fact is, as we move along in time, the cost of goods and services does increase, and it's important for you to increase your savings in order to do that. One of the mistakes that a lot of people make is they put aside retirement savings in the bank. They just say, I'm going to save X number of dollars or X number of shekels every month. I'll keep it safely in the bank for the next 40 years. And then when I retire, it will be there. And yeah, sure, that sounds great. But those shekels or those dollars are not going to buy the same amount of goods and services as when you were 20 or 30 years old. So that's not a great idea. It's important to invest, but still, we're dodging the question you asked, which is how much money you're going to need when you retire. And again, the question I'm going to go back to is, what sort of lifestyle do you want to lead? Do you think it'll look like your lifestyle today or something different?
I guess it's going to be something different. I'm going to have a family, grandchildren, going to want to be able to take more vacation, don't want to spend all day and all night working and having an income, kind of want it to be more passive.
So you said a few things. One of them is you're describing the structure of the investments that you want to have designed so that you will have passive income from them. So that normally would be something like collecting rent from real estate or dividends from stocks and mutual funds or getting interest payments from bonds. That's the idea of passive income. And there are many, many different ways of doing that. The amount of money you're going to need, I often tell people when we do the financial plan, is probably going to reflect your lifestyle to some extent. What I mean by that is, let's say that a person is spending today $5,000 or $6,000 a month, 20,000 shekels a month, something like that. Odds are when he retires or when they retire as a couple, they're not going to all of a sudden start spending 50,000 shekels a month. And the numbers I'm using are what I would refer to as inflation-adjusted numbers. We don't have to calculate what the 50,000 shekels is going to mean in 40 years. We can talk about it in today's dollars or today's shekels. And then when we run the simulations using the financial planning software, we'll build in inflation to that. So the first answer to your question is realize that your lifestyle will most likely be similar to what it is now in terms of spending. Of course, there may be more expenses as a result of having kids. So it will go up, but I don't think it's going to go up radically. Let's hold that thought for 1 minute. We'll take a break, and then we'll come back and talk about how to calculate how much money you actually need to have in that nest egg.
The Goldstein on Gelt Show is sponsored by Profile Investment Services. www.profile-financial.com.
Ready, sweetheart?
For what?
It's time to plan for our retirement.
Are you kidding? I'm only 42.
Let's start now and let compound interest work for us.
You sound like Doug Goldstein, that guy that I read in the Jerusalem Post.
He seems to know his stuff.
Maybe, but there's too much to do. Can't we just do one simple thing?
Okay, let's download Doug Goldstein's book, The Retirement Planning Book, at www.goldsteinongelt.com.
Oh, www.goldsteinongelt.com? Okay, but let's not get carried away.
The book is a quick read. Dear, I think it'll put us on the right track financially. I'll download a copy for me too. www.goldsteinongelt.com.
We are back. We were talking about retirement and how you're supposed to know how much money you need and how to plan for your retirement. So, Abba, I want to know, actually, how am I supposed to know how much money I'm going to need in 40 or 50 years?
Not only is it a great question, but it's so important to think about it now because frequently people just think the more I have, the better. I've got to have more and more and more and more. There's nothing wrong with having a lot of money, but there are a lot of times when people will literally suffer their whole working life in order to generate a huge nest egg, which is much bigger than they actually need. So I'm happy that you're talking about this. And really the way to answer this question is to work backwards. We spoke a few minutes ago about calculating how much money you'll need on a monthly basis. So we use software. We use more sophisticated financial planning software that uses a type of statistical tool called a Monte Carlo simulation. And basically what this allows us to do is to look at how much money a person is going to need every month from today until what we euphemistically call the end of the plan, which is the end. At that point, they no longer need the money. By working backwards, though, if we figure out that they need X number of dollars every month, we can then calculate how much of an investment nest egg they're going to need in order to generate that amount of income. Now, you might choose to simply draw income off the portfolio. You may say, I don't want to touch the principal, but I want to retain the principal so that I can leave an inheritance for my children. Or in many cases, sometimes it's ridiculous. For example, we've got clients who maybe helped their children all along. They helped them to buy a property. Maybe they helped to pay for the grandchildren to go to school. And the kids are all set up. Now the parents may have $2 or $3 or $4 million. It's very nice to leave a big inheritance, but perhaps they could just spend down that portfolio during their lifetime. There's no right answer to that. And each person is going to have to decide for himself where he feels more comfortable. But the tool to calculate this, that's really what I want to leave you with on this question. The question is, how do I know how much I'm going to need in my retirement? Think about how much you want to spend on a monthly basis, work backwards, and then you'll know the sum of money that you're going to need in order to generate that amount of money for the rest of your life.
That's interesting. So you don't end up 80 and having a million or 2, 3, 4 million shekels that you could have used when you were 50, correct?
I think it's a real issue. In fact, one of the things that we talk about, in my day job, Ephraim, as the director of Profile Investments, when I talk to people about their portfolios, oftentimes my clients are not only the grandparents, but as time goes on, the parents have come along as clients, and sometimes even the grandchildren are clients. So I know the financial situation of every generation. But because of confidentiality, obviously, I can never talk to one generation and tell them, oh, your grandparents have a lot of money. You could ask them. I would never, ever say that. But sometimes it's sad when I see that families don't communicate, because a lot of times the grandparents don't realize that their grandchildren would benefit today from the money. And instead they say, oh, when I die, I'll leave it as an inheritance. And at that point, the grandchildren no longer need the money. So it's important to communicate. In cases like this, by the way, because obviously I'm not going to share the information about the different generations, I spend a lot of time talking to the clients about the importance of communicating with your family about financial issues. I figure if I can teach them about that, then hopefully they'll get the hint and they'll begin to talk to each other.
That's great advice. So just one last question about how to calculate your portfolio. So as you say, you can help the people you want to help when they need the help and not wait until towards the very end to give out the money. When I'm trying to calculate for my retirement, do I want to invest through my lifetime, put aside stocks, bonds, or ETFs, and say to myself, all what I'm putting aside in one area, that's just for retirement. And then I have another half of my portfolio that I'm using for my everyday life? Or do I just want to have a big pool of money, like what you mentioned before, and then I'll spend it and use it, and as I need to pay for my kids or grandchildren, and then whatever's left in that big sum of all my money, that's what's left for me for retirement?
Once again, great question. And the answer is once again going to be, it depends. However, I'll give you a little more specific because I do want to give some direction on this. Through work, whether you are working for a company or whether you own your own company, like a day with an officer, or whether you are an independent contractor for someone else, you can set up pension plans that have certain tax benefits. This applies to people in Israel. This applies to people in the United States. This show is not about tax benefits. I'm not an accountant. I'm an investment advisor. So I'm not going to be providing tax advice here. But from an investment standpoint, it's always better if you can invest in a way that you're not going to have to pay tax every year on your investments. You want the investments to grow as long as possible without paying taxes on them. So the first thing you need to do is to set up a separate retirement plan through your work. And you can speak to your pension plan coordinator. You can speak to your boss. You might speak to your insurance company. There are many different types of companies that handle pension plans. So that's the first step. And that money will absolutely be segregated for retirement.
I'm sorry. And about that pension plan, am I able to put my own investments in that pension plan? Or is that only related to a paycheck that I'm getting from a job?
The money that you earn from work can often be put aside into a pension plan through a company. Now, if it's an insurance company that's handling the pension, they will probably have a menu and you can choose from a certain number of investment styles, or they might have certain paths that you can follow. For example, they might say you can be in the aggressive, the moderate, or the conservative path. And then depending which one you choose, they'll have more in the stock market or more in the bond market or more in government bonds. So you have some level of choice. In the United States, we have what are called IRAs, individual retirement accounts. And for the people in America or people who worked in America who may be familiar with this, those, if you handle them through a brokerage account, those are very much like a regular brokerage account. They're just wrapped up inside the tax deferred packaging. So you get the best of both worlds. You get to invest and choose your investments, whether you want stocks and bonds or ETFs or index funds or mutual funds or real estate investment trusts, all sorts of different things that you could choose. But you benefit by having them within a tax deferred framework. And it's called an IRA, stands for Individual Retirement Account.
And you pay tax on that only once you retire at the end and not throughout the years when you put in.
So again, we don't give tax advice on that program, but for people in America, that's what they're used to. They're used to the concept that they put the money in, and there are different types of IRA accounts, and that the money is supposed to grow without having to pay tax. And then depending what type of account, there may or may not be tax at the end. Generally, when you're driving and you want to go very fast, you don't drive with your foot on the gas and on the brakes. That's very much like investing. You want to be conscious of putting your foot on the taxes, the brakes, so that your investments can go as quickly and grow and get to the destination as soon as possible. Of course, one thing to be aware of, we use this metaphor about driving with your foot on the brake, not only as far as taxes, but as far as diversifying your portfolio. If you put 100% of your portfolio in super risky stocks, that's like driving full gas. It's like driving on the highway with your foot pedal to the metal. You'll get there very quickly, but if something goes wrong, you might have a terrible accident.
Great. So thank you very much, Abba. That was a lot to take in and about retirement. So I guess I should get back to work so I can earn money and save it also for retirement and be able to take my wife out for dinner, as you said, to use the money as I use when I need it now and not save it all until I'm 85 or 90. So thanks so much again. And thanks to our chief engineer, Steve Stewart, our producer, Yoram Ohana, our webmaster, Batsheva Goldstein, and thanks very much to all the Goldstein on Get listeners. Please be sure to tell your friends about the show and click like wherever you listen to the show. I'm Ephraim Goldstein, and on behalf of my father, Doug Goldstein, and myself, thank you and see you next time.
Yeah, Ephraim, I hope they will see you next time. I really enjoy having you on the show as my co-host. Hope you'll continue to join me here.
Thank you.
You've been listening to the Goldstein on Gelt Show with certified financial planner Douglas Goldstein. If you'd like your questions answered on the air or off, contact Doug by clicking on the Contact Us button at www.goldsteinongelt.com or send an email to doug@profile-financial.com. Before making any investment based on what you heard on the show, be sure to read the complete disclaimer at www.goldsteinongelt.com.